For as long as I can remember, I, Carla, have been the family's afterthought. Looking back, the signals were there from the beginning, even though they weren't always evident. Sarah, my younger sister, came into the world like a supernova, with dimpled grins and golden locks. She had our parents completely enamored with her from day one. Me, being the reserved one, I was more focused on my chemistry set than on forming friendships. I can very clearly recall my 10th birthday. For weeks, I had been leaving clues in the hopes of getting a new microscope. I ended up looking like a cupcake in a fancy frock instead. I objected, saying, "But Mom, I detest dresses." "That's absurd." She smiled, utterly oblivious to the fact that you would look exactly like Sarah. The gap just got wider as we got older. While I immersed myself in studies and experimental experiments, Sarah soared through school thanks to her charm and beautiful looks. Have you heard that Sarah is a prom queen nominee? One night over supper, Mom gushed. "That's fantastic," I said, attempting to seem enthusiastic. "Well, I took first place in today's science fair." Dad turned back to Sarah and murmured absently, "Oh, that's nice, dear." "So have you chosen your dress yet, princess?" Year after year, it continued. No matter how big or little my accomplishments were, they were always eclipsed by Sarah's most recent victory. My senior year's state science fair was my big break. I had been refining my sustainable biofuels project for months. I couldn't believe what I was hearing when they revealed the winners. Carla Johnson takes first place. Finally, something that even my parents couldn't deny made me happy. Or so I believed. When I broke the news to Mom, she responded absently, "That's great, honey, but we are unable to attend the awards ceremony. You are aware of how significant that day is to Sarah since she has a dancing recital." As my award accumulated dust on a shelf, I observed them fussing over Sarah's cosmetics and outfit. Although I was growing accustomed to it, it was a difficult pill to swallow. I was so thrilled to receive a full scholarship to a renowned institution that I could not control my enthusiasm when the acceptance letters began to arrive. It exceeded my wildest expectations. "Dad, Mom," I entered. I waved the note as I rushed into the living room. Everything and the full ride. Mom's eyes lifted from her magazine. "That's lovely, my love." "Sarah, you mentioned that you wanted assistance choosing a prom dress, right?" Suddenly, my moment of greatness was dismissed once more. "But the scholarship is full." I made another attempt, but this time I spoke more quietly. Dad gave me an involuntary shoulder pat. "Well done, child. Princess Sarah, let's go shopping. You can't simply show up to prom wearing anything, can you?" With my acceptance letter crumpled in my fingers, I watched them cram themselves into the car. Even though it was a familiar sensation, it still hurt. With great expectations, I packed my luggage and left for college despite my family's lack of hoopla. For the first time, I could be myself without the shadow of Sarah. College was enlightening. My love of science was no longer seen as strange or odd. Rather, it was valued and even revered. Determined to take full use of this chance, I poured myself back into my studies. Sarah, meanwhile, pursued the career our parents had always envisioned. With a preference for partying over academics, she enrolled in the nearby community college. During one of our few phone conversations, she said, "College is so hard." "Carla, I'm not sure how you manage." I resisted the temptation to suggest that she may find it easier if she studied more and partied less. I simply shifted the topic and muttered some ambiguous encouragement instead. My sophomore year was when Sarah revealed her shocking revelation. She exclaimed over the phone, "I'm engaged. Mike made a proposal yesterday evening. Isn't that romantic?" Her high school lover, Mike, had once asked me whether science was really that difficult and such. "That's fantastic, Sarah," I said, attempting to seem more excited. "Have you decided on a date?" She said, "We're thinking right after graduation." "Oh, Carla, it will be flawless. Will you be my maid of honor?" As you may assume, the wedding was perfect. Mike was uneasy in his tux, Sarah was glowing, and I stood there in my frilly pink nightmare, forcing a grin for the pictures. Isn't this ideal? At the reception, Mom whispered to me, "Every mother wishes for her daughter to have this." I wanted to ask if she'd ever dreamed anything for me, but I held my tongue. It was Sarah's day after all. As I threw myself into my studies and later my career, Sarah's life seemed to follow a script straight out of our parents' dreams. Within a year of her wedding, she announced her first pregnancy. "I'm going to be a grandmother," Mom squealed over the phone. "Oh, Carla, isn't it wonderful?" I murmured my congratulations, trying to ignore the implicit question in her voice. "When are you going to settle down, Carla? When will you give us grandchildren?" Emma arrived 9 months later, a bundle of pink blankets and loud cries. I flew home for the weekend, dutifully cooing over my new niece and enduring the not-so-subtle hints from my parents. "You know, Carla," Dad said, bouncing Emma on his knee, "you're not getting any younger. Don't you want this for yourself?" I gritted my teeth. "I'm focused on my career right now, Dad." "Career is all well and good, dear," Mom clucked her tongue, "but family is what really matters." I bit back a retort about how they'd never seemed to care much about my career before. Instead, I plastered on a smile and changed the subject. 2 years later, Liam joined the family. Once again, I played the role of the doting aunt, all while fielding questions about my own lack of family. Meanwhile, I was making strides in my career as a biotechnologist. Long hours and hard work paid off, and by 30, I was a senior researcher. My parents' response to this news? A distracted, "That's nice, dear," as they cooed over new pictures of Emma and Liam. It was around this time that I decided to buy a house. I'd saved carefully, living frugally while my colleagues splurged on expensive cars and vacations. When I finally found the perfect place, a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a great neighborhood, I was over the moon. "Mom, Dad, I bought a house," I announced during our next phone call. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "A house," Mom repeated. "All by yourself?" "Yes, all by myself," I said, my excitement deflating a little. "It's a great investment." "But it's such a big house for one person," Mom interrupted. "What will you do with all that space?" I sighed. "I'll enjoy it, Mom. It's mine." "Well," she said, her tone making it clear she didn't approve, "I suppose if that's what you want." "Oh, did I tell you Emma lost her first tooth yesterday?" And just like that, we were back to talking about Sarah and her kids. The months following my house purchase were a whirlwind of work and settling into my new home. I threw myself into decorating, turning each room into a reflection of my personality. It was during this time that I started to feel a shift in my family dynamics. The usual calls from my parents became less frequent, and when they did call, there was an odd tension in their voices. One evening, I received a call from my mother. "Carla, dear," she said, her voice sickly sweet, "we're having a family dinner next week. You'll be there, won't you? We need to talk." I agreed, my suspicions raised. In my family, "we need to talk" usually meant trouble was brewing. The night of the dinner arrived, and I pulled up to my parents' house with a sense of foreboding. Sarah's car was already in the driveway, and I could hear the excited shrieks of Emma and Liam from inside. Dinner was a tense affair. My parents kept exchanging glances, and Sarah seemed unusually quiet. Mike, Sarah's husband, kept clearing his throat as if he wanted to say something but thought better of it. Finally, as we were finishing dessert, my father cleared his throat. "Carla, we need to talk about something important." "Here it comes," I thought. "What's up, Dad?" He glanced at my mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Well, you see, sweetie, we've been thinking that big house of yours. It's really too much for just one person." I felt my hackles rise. "Dad, we've been over this. I like my house. It's mine." "Yes, but," he trailed off, looking uncomfortable. My mother jumped in. "What your father is trying to say is that Sarah and her family need more space. The kids are growing, and their apartment is getting cramped." I looked at Sarah, who was suddenly very interested in her plate. "Okay, and we think," my mother continued, her voice sickly sweet, "that since you're single and have no children, you should give your house to Sarah and her family. Just give them the keys and move out." For a moment, I was speechless. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to yell "gotcha," and reveal it was all a joke. But all I saw were expectant faces. "You can't be serious." I finally managed. "Now, Carla," my mother said, her tone patronizing, "don't be selfish. Sarah needs her own space more than you do." "Selfish?" I repeated, my voice rising. "How is it selfish to want to keep the house I worked hard for and paid for myself? It's your sisterly duty to help in times of need," my father chimed in. I turned to Sarah, who was still avoiding my gaze. "What do you have to say about this?" She shrugged, finally meeting my eyes. "Well, it would be nice to have more space for the kids." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, my own family asking me to give up my home, acting like I was the unreasonable one for refusing. "No," I said firmly, standing up. "Absolutely not. I'm not giving up my house." As I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, I heard my father call out, "Think about it, Carla. Family should come first." The days following that disastrous family dinner were a blur of disbelief and anger. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, unable to believe my family's audacity. How could they even think to ask such a thing? My phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls from my parents and Sarah, but I ignored them all. On the third day, as I was trying to focus on work, my phone lit up with a call from a number I didn't recognize. Figuring it wasn't family, I answered. "Hello, is this Carla?" A woman's voice came through, sounding disapproving. "Yes, who's this?" "This is your Aunt Mildred." "I can't believe what I'm hearing about you, young lady. Your poor sister needs a home for her children, and you're living all alone in that big house. Shame on you." I felt my blood pressure rising. "Aunt Mildred, that's not." "In my day," she continued, not letting me get a word in, "family helped family. We didn't hoard our resources like misers." "I'm not hoarding anything," I snapped. "It's my house. I bought it with my own money." "Well," she huffed, "if you're not going to use all that space, you should at least consider donating your eggs. It's not like you're using them anyway." I was so shocked I nearly dropped the phone. "Excuse me." "You heard me," she said primly. "You're not getting any younger, you know. Tick-tock." I hung up without another word, my hand shaking with anger. How dare she? How dare any of them? But it didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I was bombarded with calls and messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Each one had an opinion on what I should do with my house and my life. My great-aunt Edna left a voicemail. "Carla dear, it's your great-aunt Edna. I just wanted to say it's not too late to find a nice man and settle down. Then you'd need that big house." It was relentless. Every ping of my phone brought a new judgment, a new guilt trip. I felt like I was going crazy. I started to dread checking my phone, wincing every time it buzzed. I threw myself into work, staying late at the lab just to avoid going home to more messages. It was during one of these late nights at work that I got sick. Nothing serious, just a bad cold, but enough that my boss insisted I take a few days off to recover. So there I was, curled up on my couch with a box of tissues, feeling miserable both physically and emotionally. My phone had been mercifully quiet for a few hours, and I was just starting to relax when I heard it. A noise at my front door, like someone was fumbling with the lock. My heart started racing. Was someone trying to break in? I got up as quietly as I could, creeping towards the door. Through the window, I could see figures on my porch, familiar figures. I yanked the door open, startling the people on the other side. "What the hell are you doing here?" Caught red-handed were my parents and Sarah. They looked like deer caught in headlights, frozen in the act of trying to break into my home. My mother was the first to recover. "Carla, dear, we were just worried about you. You haven't been answering your phone. So you decided to break into my house." I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. My father at least had the decency to look embarrassed. "We didn't think you'd be home. We thought you'd be at work. And that makes it okay." I was practically shouting now. "What were you planning to do? Move Sarah in while I was gone?" Sarah, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Carla, you're being hysterical. We were just going to wait for you to come home." I noticed for the first time that there was a car parked behind them, loaded with boxes and furniture. My blood ran cold as I realized the full extent of their plan. "You were going to move in," I said, my voice flat. "You were actually going to move into my house without my permission." "Now, Carla," my mother started, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I knew so well. "We've discussed this. Sarah needs the space more than you do. We thought if we just took the initiative." "You thought wrong," I cut her off. "This is my house. Mine. I bought it with my own money I earned through hard work. You have no right to it." Just then, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. My neighbors, the Johnsons, were peering out their window, clearly concerned by the commotion. Mr. Johnson caught my eye and held up his phone, signaling police. I nodded, grateful for their concern. Turning back to my family, I said, "I've called the police. You need to leave now." "You wouldn't," my father scoffed. "Your own family." As if on cue, the sound of sirens filled the air. My family's faces paled as the police car pulled up and 2 officers got out. "Is there a problem here?" one of them asked, eyeing the scene warily. I took a deep breath. "Yes, officer, these people were attempting to break into my home." "Carla," my mother gasped. "How could you?" The officers looked at my family. "Is this true?" My father started to stammer out an explanation, but the officer held up a hand. "Sir, attempting to enter a property without the owner's permission is a serious offense. I'm going to have to ask you all to leave immediately." As the officers escorted my family off my property, I stood in the doorway, shaking. I couldn't believe it had come to this. "You'll regret this, Carla." Sarah called over her shoulder as they were leaving. "You'll end up old and alone." I slammed the door shut, sliding down to sit on the floor, my back against it. Tears started to flow freely now, a mix of anger, hurt, and relief. My phone had fallen silent. No more calls from distant relatives, no more guilt-tripping messages. It was as if I'd been excommunicated from the family. Part of me was relieved, but another part ached for the connection. Dysfunctional as it had been, it was in this tumultuous state that I received an unexpected message. It was from my Aunt Maggie, my mother's sister. We hadn't spoken in years, not since she'd had a falling out with my mom over some old family drama. "I'll meet you tomorrow at Cafe Blue at 4:00 hours." Intrigued and desperate for any ally, I agreed to meet her. The next day, I found myself sitting across from Aunt Maggie in a cozy corner of Cafe Blue. She looked older than I remembered, but her eyes were sharp and kind. "Carla," she began, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm so sorry for what you've been through. Your mother called me trying to get me on her side, but there's more to this story than you know. That's why I asked you to meet me." My curiosity piqued. I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Aunt Maggie took a deep breath. "Your parents and Sarah, they're in serious financial trouble. Sarah and Mike have been living beyond their means for years. Luxury cars, designer clothes, lavish vacations, all on credit." I shook my head in disbelief. "But why? How?" "It's worse than that," Aunt Maggie continued. "Mike has a gambling problem, a bad one. He's been secretly draining their accounts for years. The pieces started to fall into place, the desperate attempt to get my house, the constant pressure." "But what about Mom and Dad?" I asked. Aunt Maggie's face grew grim. "They lost a significant amount of money in a pyramid scheme a few years back. They've been barely keeping their heads above water. They were planning to move in with Sarah and Mike as soon as they got your house." I sat back stunned. "How do you know all this?" "I work at the bank where they all have accounts," Aunt Maggie explained. "I noticed some suspicious activity and started digging. When I confronted your mother about it, she cut me out of the family." My mind was reeling. All this time, while I'd been working hard and saving, my family had been digging themselves into a hole, and they tried to drag me down with them. "Carla," Aunt Maggie said gently, "I know this is a lot to take in, but I think it's time we did something about this situation, if you're willing." "I have an idea." Armed with the information Aunt Maggie had shared, we decided to dig deeper. We hired a private investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Diana who came highly recommended. For weeks, we waited anxiously as Diana worked her magic. Finally, she called us in for a meeting. What she revealed left us speechless. Mike, Sarah's husband, had been leading a double life. He was involved in an affair with none other than my cousin Jenny, Uncle Bob's daughter. He's been funneling money to her for months, Diana explained, showing us bank statements and hotel receipts. Expensive gifts, weekend getaways, you name it. "But where did he get the money?" I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. Diana's face grew grim. "From his gambling wins and from your parents." Aunt Maggie and I exchanged shocked glances. The betrayal ran deeper than we'd imagined. We decided to host a family gathering at my house. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very house they had tried to take from me would be the stage for their undoing. The day of the gathering arrived. I watched as my family members trickled in, their faces a mix of curiosity and smugness. They probably thought I was going to cave to their demands. Once everyone was seated, I stood up, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. "I've called you all here today because there are some things you need to know," I began. I laid out everything. The financial troubles, the gambling, the affair. With each revelation, I watched the color drain from their faces. Sarah jumped up, tears streaming down her face. "It's not true," she screamed before collapsing into sobs. "Mike, tell them it's not true." But Mike was already halfway to the door. Uncle Bob, his face contorted with rage, caught him by the collar. "You son of a," he growled. "That's my daughter you've been fooling around with." My parents sat in stunned silence. The reality of their exposed financial ruin seemed more devastating than the fact that they had tried to steal my house. The relatives who had judged me so harshly began to stammer out apologies. We had no idea, Aunt Mildred muttered. Carla, we're so sorry. As the chaos unfolded around me, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth was out. The lies and manipulations were exposed. In the weeks that followed, our family was turned upside down. Sarah, unable to forgive Mike's infidelity, filed for divorce. With nowhere else to go, she and the kids moved back in with our parents. But their reprieve was short-lived. The bank foreclosed on their house, and they were forced to downsize to a small rented apartment. All 5 of them crammed into a space smaller than my living room. As for me, I watched it all unfold from a distance. After much soul-searching and several tearful nights, I made the difficult decision to sever all ties with my immediate family. You're doing the right thing, Carla, Aunt Maggie assured me one afternoon over coffee. It's not easy, but it's necessary for your mental health and well-being. Aunt Maggie had become my rock, the family I chose when my blood relatives had let me down. Our weekly coffee dates became a cornerstone of my new life. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself settling into a new routine. Without the constant drama and demands of my family, I had time to focus on myself. But with that came a startling realization. I was lonely. You know, Aunt Maggie said one day, there's a world out there beyond work and home. Why don't you try something new? With her encouragement, I decided to join a local rock climbing group. It was far outside my comfort zone, but as I strapped on the harness for the first time, I felt a thrill of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. Alex and I met there. With his powerful hands managing the rope with assurance, he was belaying another climber. My heart skipped a beat as he turned and gave me a loving grin. Observing my anxious fiddling with the apparatus, he said, first time, "Is it really that clear?" I chuckled. We started talking, and his gentle demeanor and warm gaze drew me in right away. I discovered throughout our conversation that he was a wildlife photographer who was passionate about preserving the splendor of the natural world. I was excited about the prospect of a relationship for the first time in years. Alex was adventurous, friendly, and had a unique understanding of the intricacies of family dynamics. Our mutual appreciation of nature and comprehension of intricate family dynamics drew us closer together when we started dating. Before I knew it, we were talking about marriage, which at the time seemed alien and unachievable. Aunt Maggie was my rock-solid support system through it all. She turned into the mother figure I had always wanted but never experienced. One day, with hazy eyes, she whispered to me, "Carla, I want you to know something. I have a new will. You will handle everything." Tears were running down my cheeks as I gave her a hug, and I was struck by how drastically my life had changed. Though it hadn't been simple, the journey had brought me to my destiny. With Alexa's encouragement, Aunt Maggie's affection, and my newly discovered strength, I was prepared to face whatever was ahead.